men, when they have an issue or a difficulty in their relationships or their intimate lives, they often want to fix it. What if actually you had incredible resources, you had incredible beauty, truth, and goodness exactly as you are? I think one of the greatest gifts we can give to our partners is to see them as poetry. I remember during that period of time, I was very susceptible to girls' beauty. You know, girls stink and girls are stupid and all this kind of stuff. And I was kind of like, yeah, saying all that stuff too. I actually had a client, a Norwegian, who said, you know, if my friends at school knew how much I loved girls, they would all call me gay. Obviously, the most nonsensical sentence you can imagine. When I finished my studies, I looked around and I realized that modern Britain at the time was nothing that I could fit into. So I decided to follow my heart. When you've been on the outside, you then see how people are suffering and what they're missing on the inside. What is my story? What is my myth? What do I love? What fills me with wells of energy? There is a profound easiness and an uncomplicatedness to being a man. Once we find, I think, a particular liberation from the things that we suffer with.
Welcome back to this new WAYSHOWERS podcast episode. It's episode 4. Today we're going to dive in with Jordan Luke Collier. But before that, let me just give you a quick update on what's been going on in my life, because it's been more than a month since the last episode was launched, and I want you to know why. I just became a dad to our firstborn, a son. Michelle, my fiancée, and I, we have been quite preoccupied welcoming this being. He's incredibly cute and quite harmonious. Seems like his nervous system is fairly well regulated, and I think it's because Michelle and I, we have been preparing well, she's been eating well, and we're also a great team. And so I'm really grateful and I feel privileged to have this particular soul and being coming to us, because he seems quite special. I'm not going to share much in terms of video and photos. I'm going to keep his privacy for now, but this has been a big thing in my life, and that's been the reason why things have been a bit slow with this WAYSHOWERS podcast. So I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. It's time to dive in. Welcome back to a new episode of the WAYSHOWERS podcast. Today I have the great pleasure to have you, Jordan Luke Collier, as my guest. So you, Jordan, you are a transformational men's coach and an author. And well, there's a lot to you that I would love to dig into. And, you know, we have known of each other and been colleagues for many years. As we always do on this show, we start with, like, who are you? What do you do? What is your story for becoming a transformational men's coach and an author?
Right. Well, thanks, Ivan, for upgrading into author right off the bat. I told you, writer, I haven't actually completed a book and got it out into the world. This writing definitely feels something like destiny for me and my happy zone, but I'm not an author, but I will take that on, and maybe that's shaping very. Yeah.
I feel very similar to you. I've not released my first book myself, but I'm writing a lot.
Yeah.
So you're a future author.
Maybe you're some kind of future angel for me, because I remember about 10 years ago when we first met, you had me on your Reclaim Your Inner Fun program. I'm sorry. And you dubbed me the lover archetype. And in my mind at the time, I was a men's dating relationship coach. But you upgraded me from men's dating relationship coach into the embodiment of the lover archetype. And that gave me a new identity to really grow into and explore. It was really profound, actually, that invited me into a higher octave, actually, of the same work. Yeah. So
brilliant. Yeah. I'm glad I didn't know that I had that impact on you. But that's lovely to hear. Yeah. So over the years, I've known you as somebody who works very closely with men who maybe struggle in their connection with women, or maybe they don't struggle, but they just want that little bit of edge or more artistic, beautifying presence in the relational arena. And yeah, do you feel like this is still who you are, or maybe you can speak to this a little bit? Why has that been so important for you?
Well, that work that's been my life and my profession for the last 11 years. I would say
Yeah.
I'm more specifically a poetic and a literary men's coach in this domain. And I say that meaning most of the time, men, when they have an issue or a difficulty in their relationships or their intimate lives, they often want to fix it. I need to
Mm.
fix my dating life. I need to nail this thing, get this in order, as if it's ever going to be in order, in a short package of time. And a lot of that, I want to fix my relationship to women. I want to fix my relationship life, comes with it a kind of self-improvement mindset, which I think can over a period of time actually be quite destructive and disconnecting. I want to
Yeah.
improve myself so that I become a better performer, a better lover, a better seducer, a better superior man. I want to convert myself into an enhanced version of myself so that I can get the things I want, please other people, etc., etc. Built on top of a surface, which is I'm not worthy actually, or I'm not lovable as I am. And so I really want to kind of call that out in men that I work with and instead take a more poetic look at the situation that you're in. Like, what if there was nothing wrong or nothing incomplete about your current circumstances? That's usually a big thing for a man who's in pain around this area to accept. But what if actually you had incredible resources, you had incredible beauty, truth, and goodness exactly as you are, and we started from this place? So in my work, I'm looking first of all to, I take a very poetic view of the life circumstances of the men that I work with, rather than
Mm.
see them as, only on round 3 of the mountain of 10 different rungs in their life, or looking for where they can improve. I'm looking at what's actually poetic. How would I capture this person and their circumstance in this moment in their life as it is? How can I see that as beautiful already? How can I help you to make a story or to reinterpret your circumstances in a way that you see beauty and poetry in what's going on with you, including in your loneliness and your struggle? Can you see that when you look at women, when you look at the people that you want to be in a relationship with, do you see those people too as poetic, or maybe a bit of a project, or maybe
Mm.
some out of your league that one day you have to attain to? And the one of the key insights that I've been very fortunate to get is, if we can look out at the world, at others, and see other people as poetry rather than this kind of modern sense of a human being that's not functioning, dysfunctional or something like that, or wounded, or has their work to do ahead
Yeah.
of them. It seems to make other people open and feel more delighted to be in a conversation with you. So in terms of being a romantic, in terms of intimacy, in terms of being in a relationship, I think one of the greatest gifts we could give to our partners is to see them as poetry, and see ourselves somehow as poetic, and feel the thing that we're both living together as something artistic, cinematic, literary. Yeah.
I'm reminded as you speak of why I did come to you as the embodiment of the lover archetype. Because you're sharing a view that is quite radical in terms of how I perceive the kind of offerings that are out there in the personal development, transformational space. Typically, there is a sense, and I think I'm a bit more in that camp than you are. Like, there is work to do, and there are things that we need to integrate, and maybe a bit more of that carry your cross kind of mentality. But you're coming to it from this place like a it's almost like I feel the presence of an innocent childlike wonder in what you're saying. Does that feel true, or?
Really clear. Yeah, that's part of it. And
Yeah.
as you speak this back, I feel another perspective, which is kind of the director of cinema or the
Mm,
screenwriter. Like if I'm going to create a wonderful piece of art, I'm going to begin with my character, and my character is never going to be perfectly put together. They're going to be
yeah.
broken. And if I choose to make one sympathetic, like my protagonist or the love object or whatever it is, if I want to portray a person who's generally sympathetic but also quite broken, and they go on an interesting character arc, then I'm actually going to look at them, including all the places where they're broken. So do I, as a film director or as a painter or as a writer, want to create a character who's, just doing work and incrementally improving year after year?
Right.
There's not so much from a soul level. Like when I look at that from the outside, I don't get so much resonance back. It's like it's
Right.
beautiful to look into the mirror and be like, wow, you're actually broken in this way. That resonates so much to me. That enlivens me to know that I feel somehow seen and reflected back, in that you struggle
Mm.
in these areas and I do too. Wow. So that the connection of maybe struggle and struggle, or wound and wound, let's say, um, itself creates an incredible beauty and an incredible intimacy,
Mm.
rather than being in and I've been in these, rather than being in a relationship where we're coaching each other all the time.
Right. So there's a sense here of a character going on an adventure of becoming. Like there's something compelling about this character because of the way that you frame him and his uniqueness. You don't have this bland introduction to a movie, but actually you're seeking for the ways in which this person is sort of beautifully fractured in his own unique way. And I'm reminded of, I don't remember what that art is called, but there's a Japanese art form where whatever you break, you put it back together with like gold, and then that's considered like even more beautiful than the object was before it broke. And
Yeah,
that, do
exactly.
you are you familiar with that art
Yeah,
form?
I forget the name of it, but it's like now you've actually got something to look at in the vase, because not only have you got the perfect originally constructed vase, but you've got the handiwork of how did this thing fall apart, and then how
Yeah.
did the craftsman put it back together again, and like what is the unique kind of riff in this?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, because every break, every rupture, every way of falling apart, it is unique. And I wonder, is this connected to this teaching around the wound, the sacred wound, like the core wound becoming the sacred wound, so the wound becomes the gift that you give, or is that more of a psychotherapeutic approach and that you don't really see it that way?
I do see it that way. I think the notion of the sacred wound is incredibly important, and that's been something definitely huge in my life, and that I speak with a lot with the men I work with. But
Yeah.
just in this way, it's like I don't know how many wounds we all have. If we were to add them up and say I've got like 200, one of them's like a huge rift and a happy, but then I've got other kind of vein and capillary wounds all over me, right? Um, we can compare sacred wounds. We can connect in smaller wounds, but the general idea is one of it's like an artistic liberation, right? Like
Mm.
you could say 2023 is the year that I'm going to get my dating life handled and I'm going to up level as a man. You go on this
Yeah.
big self improvement march from workshop to workshop, and by the end of it, you might feel a little bit better about yourself, probably
Mm.
because you're in a self improvement mindset. And you just walk into another neurosis. It's just involving, what's 2024 going to look like, and pushing it on. Or you can kind of liberate yourself now by saying,
Yeah.
wow, what if this is it? Actually, can I accept what are the things that are spurring me on to want to change myself? Well, can I really articulate them a little bit better? Can I breathe into them? Can I give love to them? Can I kind of accept them? That's a big
Yeah.
ask, but that's the
Yeah.
first step of healing, of course, right? And it's also the first step of a deep intimacy.
Yeah. It reminds me of a model that I use inside of my membership, the guild, where I don't need to go into detail about it, but there is a way that we get stuck in this life hacking mentality, and then we're learning all kinds of techniques, and then we notice that, you know, we have this other flaw that we didn't notice, and now we need to hack that one. And then we do all kinds of technical kind of strategic work, which of course jives really well with the masculine orientation. But fundamentally, we always come from this idea that I'm like the engine that's not working. But then in the way that I've conceptualized it, you need to come to a place of like touching ground, touching bottom in a sense, and just accepting like, well, actually, this is the guy that I am. And when that happens, and you can be a yes to what is, you can actually start re-engaging with a similar kind of work, but you're not running away from it, but you're actually moving towards it. And I think this is quite similar to what you're talking about, even though you're adding a lot of poetry and art.
Yeah.
Does that? Yeah.
Very much.
Great. So how did you end up here? Like this is quite unique, and I'm just maybe where it came from, this idea that there was like an innocent, you know, adventuring spirit. I was projecting like Jordan as a young boy, like creating the foundation, building blocks for this future work. I don't know. Is that true?
That definitely happened. Jordan is a little boy with a sacred wound as well, right?
Yeah.
We're in the kind of the same age range. I mean, if we really take, you know, plunge into the kind of genesis of it all, around 5, 6, 7 years old, a lot of big stuff happens in my life, right? Parents split up, so there's a rift and an original kind of place where that wound took place.
Yeah.
And then I remember having some really monumental experiences of just going on holiday with my family. And one year went to Spain, and I just had amazing memories of being on this beach. They're beautiful, you know, girl, 7-year-old girl, and falling in love. And I remember during that period of time, I was very susceptible to girls' beauty, and all the other boys in school are playing football.
And you're not that anymore, of course. You don't care.
Girls stink and girls are stupid and all this kind of stuff. And I was kind of like, yeah, I'm saying all that stuff too, but really I was, I don't know. I just had a bit more of a sensitivity to it, sparkling pair of eyes, and, you know, let me smile. And this thing of what is the feminine energy in girls and women and so on.
Right.
And as I grew up, I pursued that. And adolescence for me was tough in that regard. But in the young adult,
sensitive or
yeah, exactly.
Right.
I think in my case, it was a sense of having this really big heart and attraction, and also the neediness related to the pain of, you know, upbringing. And, you know, my father was not present in those young years of my life. So all that stuff, like a boy who doesn't have like the backup or the strength in his father behind him, who's maybe, you know, looking or over attentive to women and wanting to have that as well. It was all in the mix. And I think I loved women, but if other people, I actually had a client, a Norwegian, who said, you know, if my friends at school knew how much I loved girls, they would all call me gay. Obviously, the most nonsensical sentence you can imagine. But in terms of being found out as an English boy as having some kind of sensitivity in the heart, like I like beauty and that makes me happy and I want that, all the other boys would, you know, or might or could turn on me, bully me, outcast me, ostracize me because I've got maybe a romantic proclivity, right? So I kept a lot of myself in. At that age, it was okay to make out with a lot of girls or sleep with girls or get your numbers up and stuff like that. But you would never admit something like love or romantic longing or, you know, really wanting a girl.
But that simply wasn't part of the culture.
Yeah. You would be cool, but you would never give away that you actually feel anything on the inside. So I was very protective actually about being found out as an English boy who had feelings. And
but you were in England at the time.
Yeah, I grew up in England. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be found out for that. So obviously that put the brakes on my dating life. And my solution to this was, as soon as I could, when I'm 22, 23 years old, I moved to South America, and I ended up living a lot of years in Brazil and Argentina. And the soul searching piece in this, or the missing, like, I was curious, who are the most beautiful women on the planet? Can I go and find somebody, go and scour the world for a Penelope Cruz or a Salma Hayek or something like this? But I think deeper than that, there was a sense of on these South American cultures, I project sensuality, emotionality, the ability to be whole with one's feeling is kind of the southern archetype, in fully embodied, fully whole, fully virile, fully sexual. I wanted to be in touch with those cultures, hoping that would rub off on me as well, and I'd be able to reclaim that confidence in my sexuality and sensuality. Yeah.
Cool. So there's a young English boy in a culture which I guess is fairly similar to other cultures, at least at the time. I don't exactly know what it's like now. Seems to be very confusing landscape with the wokeness and everything coming in, so I can't really analyze the situation accurately. But but you have this young boy that has poetry in his heart and like appreciation for beauty, and I sense there were a couple of little girl muses along the way that just propelled you further into this kind of lifestyle. And there's a dad that's not present, so he's not shaping you in that masculine way, but somehow these women become would you say it is an obsession? Is it like unhealthy, or is it a good kind of longing that is growing in you at that point?
My word. Yeah, I think it oscillated between the two, honestly. Right. I mean, obsession, that's a really strong word. Like,
it is a strong word.
I have to define that. What do you mean? How was it exactly? But yeah.
It's kind of like you're being run by it. You don't have choice in the matter. It's like an all-consuming thing.
Possibly. I mean, I in a way, I see a soul's journey, like, to give it a name. If you are to, what I did very, very strongly was, when I finished my studies, I looked around and I realized that modern Britain at the time was nothing that I could fit into. Like, the shaping of who I was and what I wanted, the society did not make sense. And it was weird because we grew up with great mythology and stories and heroic adventures.
That is weird.
You get to be an adult, it's all dry. So I decided to follow my heart, as people would say, right? Follow my heart, follow my soul. Was it an obsession? Yeah, definitely. The broken pieces inside of me spurred me on to go and find healing, find compensation for the things that I missed out on. Okay, I'm going to go to parts of the world where I'm going to, run around and meet all the women I can. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think in following that kind of sacred wound territory, it's also the one's dharma or one's actual personal myth in a grander way, which is I need to go and follow this thing in a good and a healthy way, because the treasure that I'm going to bring back to myself and later to others is so great. So yeah, and I think the whole way that I've heard it said, when someone kind of drops out of conventional society, what are they actually doing with their life? Is it that they're growing into some deeper form of discovery, like you see beneath the fabric of the kind of bullshit expectations and the consumer conformity that everyone wants to place you in? Are you actually seeking out a deeper existence and a deeper version of yourself, or are you on an exodus? Let's go where the beers are cheap and the girls are pretty and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Do we get stuck, right, in some kind of addictive thing? And definitely I trod that line between, is this an exodus, a flaking out of society with its rigor and its harshness and its rat race, or is this actually on a journey towards soul? And I definitely skated that line for a long, long time.
I find it fascinating how many men who are who are leaders in the field of men's work, transformational work, have quite a similar story of being the odd one out early on. And I'm wondering, is that what actually spurs us onto the leadership path? Is that in a way an early individuation process? Like, is that how you come to shape yourself as a leader? Because you actually have to differentiate yourself from the normative culture very early on. Do you feel that is the case with you?
Perhaps. I mean, I definitely went a different way, and then I definitely returned as somebody very different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess a later question comes, which is, I've spent a number of years outside of culture doing the explorations that I have. When I come back, how do I shape myself up as someone who has an offering? Because clearly I'm not going to go, if I didn't go into the corporate path at 23, I'm not going to go into it. What's on my resume for the last 10 years, right? But
Well, you could do a David White and take poetry into corporate culture.
well, yeah, maybe it's happening. That's where I'll end up going.
Yeah.
But along the way, I mean, I come back as someone different, and then when you've been on the outside, you then see how people are suffering and what they're missing on the inside. And then it's like, oh, I've actually got really big pieces to the equation now that I could come back and plug into culture with something very, very significant to offer.
Yeah.
And a myth, right? Like people might have laughed at me and judged me when I first started traveling. Why do you want to do this? It sounds stupid. So you want to be at home with your mates and do what everyone else is doing? No, again, going to the furthest country in the world that I can possibly find. But then a few years later, you realize actually people really respect that. Oh, they actually grow dry, or they see through, or painful things happen to them that starts to rupture their kind of set of life image of white picket fence perfection that everyone's living in. And now they're looking for answers. Hey, Jordan, by the way, just wanted to ask you this in private, but you told me about that country that you went to with this island. Where's a good place to stay at the beginning of that? And then you actually find that path becomes useful for other people as well.
Yeah. 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 That is a hero's journey on so many levels, actually. Is when you step out of the normative and people start to look at you, it's like, what kind of weirdo is this guy? And then there is that soulful impulse that I think lives in everyone, but to greater and lesser degrees. The soulful impulse of going on a quest. There is something inside of, I believe, most people that wants to be an adventuring spirit, at least for a while. And I think that is why a lot of adults that never traveled feel restless in their marriages and in their families when they grow older. In a similar fashion as I hate to say this, but it's true. It's like the man who married his high school sweetheart is so often wondering what it would have been like with another woman, because they never got to sample the palette of feminine flavors. So they come to you, presumably because you've been on that path and you have sampled a lot. You've sampled culture, nature, old and new worlds, and old and new souls, feminine souls. And there's something appealing about that in a corporate culture where people sit down on the metro every morning and look at their phone and try to not be seen by everyone else who's there. And it feels very mechanistic and very soulless. So I get that that is compelling, but it makes me curious, the kind of men that come to you, are they of a similar inclination as you were as a young boy? Are they kind of the outsiders, the renegades, the dreamers, or are they more like the guy that has been stuck in a dry marriage for like 30 years and he just wants a little bit of water to drink, from the well springs of life? Who are these men?
Everything. So I've worked with men from 17 years old up to 67. And
Right.
there's been a few of them that have just declared, I want to follow in your footsteps. And I'm like, do you really? Well, let's have a conversation, because you can follow in my footsteps, and maybe I can condense 10 years of exploration down into 18 months for you, right? So you can avoid some of the lost cul-de-sacs. So I do have a lot of that, but more to the point, I think when you're talking about the kind of dry life or marrying your high school sweetheart and just following the conventional train, I work with a lot of men that see themselves as they've been climbing the first mountain, as David Brooks puts it. And so just going after success and attainment, so all the things that you should do to build a good life, right? But the soul's urge is crying, sometimes is kicking and screaming inside of them. And then they reach out and they're like, I need to get off of this dry path. I want something that in what you talk about, I want my own version of it. I don't know what it is. And a lot of the men, it's a very bewildering time, because you struggle for a paradigm. What is this? If I step off the first mountain, then what happens? And I recommend this book, is really nice laid out. He calls
David
it
Brooks, is that what you said?
David Brooks, yeah. He's got a book
I'm
called
not
The Second
familiar with
Mountain.
it.
So the first mountain, you're climbing this just blueprint of what society is giving you to climb. Law school, high school sweetheart, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then you realize that's just very conformist and ego-based pursuits. And if you're lucky enough that soul starts stirring within you and you get a calling to some kind of adventure, then you come off the first mountain and go into the valley. Now, the problem with that is, as you go into the valley, you might divorce your first wife, or you might let go of your secure and well-paying job. And you might threaten your savings, everything you've been saving for these whole times. And all you know is that you want something different. And there's no actual vision, because the vision is gone. And you find yourself in that dark wood, right? I woke up in the middle of my life in a dark wood, and the true way was gone. Taken.
Is that Mr. White?
Yeah, no, that's the dancing. Yeah, so they wake up, and then it's like, I don't know where to go. So where I come in is to offer first of all, a paradigm of actually this is fairly normal, and it's workable, and there's a way through this wilderness terrain. And then the other empowering thing I offer is a narrative. Like I mentioned before, with the see in your life circumstance poetry, can you see something of you're walking out of a life that you've now grown out of, and you're no longer energized by it? Can we find a particular beauty to the thing that you're experiencing now? Can you start to tell yourself a more beautiful story about what we're doing?
So there's something in what you just said that, okay, so you climbed the first mountain, and I guess the metaphor that David Brooks uses is that there will be a number of mountains after the first mountain, and I guess you can climb mountains for the rest of your life towards enlightenment. But the situation that you describe of a man who has followed the mold, he's done the right thing, and he comes to be stood on that first mountain, and he's like, yeah, it's not so hot up. I mean, it's not so special. I need more. And he comes to you, and you already sense that, okay, clearly his work isn't working. Clearly his relationship isn't working. I'm asking as a colleague in the field, but I'm also asking you and your particular, artistic, beautifying vision. what do you do in that position of responsibility when you realize that maybe his whole life is about to go down the drain? You know, do
Yeah.
you do you uh do you work with him to beautify his life as it is, or
Yeah.
is it like, yeah, no, let's just let's just raise the anchor and set sail right away because clearly there's nothing to salvage here?
Yeah. That's a really good question, because I ask myself that a lot, right? Ethically, what ought I do? Because certainly if I'm writing or broadcasting something online, I can be extremely forthright and passionate about what I think is the right path and what path
Yeah,
I've chosen and what I'm longing for. But when I speak to someone dead on and he really might make a big life decision, I want to make sure I have as, in a funny way, he's coming to me for guidance. I want to have as little influencing effect from that as possible. So, I mean,
yeah.
it's the foundational move of
Paradox.
coaching. You come on the phone and you listen, and you have to listen very, very deeply, far more deeply than the words, and really feel into what is the long arc of this man's life and what are the varying complex factors that he's managing. So to answer your question more specifically, I'm worked with a client over a long period of time. I would say about 15 months or so. He put the big question on the table. My soul wants to do this, grab a yacht and go around the world. But really, my business, if I just give it another 15 months, I can get it to such a position that I'm going to be able to make investments and take care of people that I love. And it's going to put me in such a better position. So it's like we're holding these two things. Most men who come to me, they don't usually say, I'm stuck on this mountain of conventional living and I don't want to get out and I don't know how. No, most men come to me and they're like, I'm kind of stuck in this conventional world, but I really know what I want. And yet I'm stuck between these competing commitments, right? So I sit there and listen and kind of unpack a little what fears are keeping this thing in place, but what kind of romanticizing is going on here to maybe make the soul's path look outlandishly good. Are you watching too much Instagram? Have you got an unreal perspective of what that is? Some people do. But then on the other side, it's like, is building your business life at home and staying in the conventional world, can that be beautified? Is there a narrative? Is there meaning in that struggle? Is it time to develop some of those qualities of yourself, which later on are going to benefit this? And so in some cases, I have coached people and I kept them on the mountain as, just knuckle down and get some business success. But then they usually come back and they say, yeah, I did it. And I'm so grateful that I did it. Now I'm ready to take the plunge in the other direction of the deeper way. Good. And then with some other people, I'm just like, what's stopping you? Sell the house, sell the house. What the hell are you doing? And I am offering a whisper, like a cheeky trickster whisper of, no, it's time to go. You've long outstayed your welcome. If you stay where you are, you already told me you're getting sick doing this thing that you do not like. Like take a step. I'm here. What's stopping you? What's the fear? Okay. And they come down into the valley of the thing they long for most, the fear, outrageously.
Yeah. That's such an alive place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever regretted taking the different path? Like, have you ever been curious about what life would have been like if you pursued like corporate success and all of these things?
Not that much. No. Like, did I ever sit for a couple of hours and dwell? Probably not. I had a client once who said something really wonderful to me. He said he went traveling for similar reasons at a similar age that I did and had many months abroad and beautiful memories, right? And he ignited the lover within himself, poetic, wonderful man and so on. We have many things in common. But he came home and he was offered a work and he didn't really want to take it. But around that time, he met a woman, absolutely beloved, and they got together and he continued this career path and he had the whole corporate thing. He said, Jordan, you're like a sliding doors version of me, because if I had been offered the job or if I was not walking down this high road in London and I didn't kind of bump into the sort of childhood flame in the coffee shop and we didn't start dating again, I might have been on the flight next week out of here somewhere else. And I stayed in this conventional life in England, but you went out and did everything that you did. So I've seen my role in life over the last 10 years or so as I'm a sliding doors man. Like, for everyone who did the conventional thing, I have seen this other kind of exotic and wild and mythical world, and I bring it back, right? So that's this. And as years go by, we kind of mutually nourish each other more. You know, I in the days where I was the lover archetype in your program, I could allow myself to.
You were representing it. I don't agree that you were it.
Over-identify it. I flow out my existence and my role to play. But, you know, as I come back, I also get nurtured by that side as well, which is, kinghood and responsibility and wanting to be a provider for other people and build a place in which we live, in which we can grow something. So I'm drinking from the water of skill, you know.
This makes me curious. There are, say you have the kind of rock star archetype, for instance, that has a lot of sexual partners. Women come to him with such ease. And there is a certain point where that doesn't look so good on a man anymore, when he's like 70 years old and you wonder where's the elder, you know?
Yeah.
He still is acting like a teenager. And I'm wondering, as a man goes out in the world on a soulful impulse, on the hunch that there's something out there for him, and he tastes everything, is there a point at which something in him, in this particular case you feel like there is a pull back to something more of a conventional, grounded, like maybe even sedentary isn't what I want, but like more of a you're in the same place and building your kingdom kind of a way? Is that part of the package? Because I would think that at a certain point you need to get in the mentality of finding instead of searching, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where how do you see this, and how has this played out for you?
Well, I laughed when you talked about the rock star, because I know this character, right? And the decades go by and the inner psychology and the things that they're living doesn't evolve. And at one point you're like, you were my hero a few years ago, but now it's like you are a warning sign. It's something I don't want to run into.
Yeah.
I was particularly lucky because I did find something, and I decided to take the plunge and begin a monogamous relationship and choose above all else that I would do what it took in order to build us stability and flourishing. That was the start of a completely different adventure. But if I had maybe kept my heart closed a little bit more, or not taken the courageous step to say, I love you and I love you and I feel inclined and I feel this love is so valuable and worthwhile that I'm willing to sacrifice my wholly independent, self-searching, self-serving life in order to create something together with you. If I was a little bit more addicted to my own stuff, or a little bit on my own self-improvement, Jordan narrative story, I could have just said goodbye to that opportunity for love. I could still be single now, and I could still be, circumambulating the globe looking for something. That changed everything. The recognition. I was lucky. I was provided with a paradigm before this happened that you can. I believed in it, I guess, but you can evolve to greater, wider, deeper experiences of life and love in a committed relationship with someone, rather than just being at the perpetual buffet. And I believe that was true. And when the opportunity came to me, I took the plunge and went into that, and it has been so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do feel
force me, to come into what is your king archetype. What is it to put some stakes in the ground and commit to certain things in different dimensions? An intimate relationship force me to do that because I need to provide a sense of ground. Otherwise, we're two people in chaos, and I think I don't know. I sense that if I was still seeking for myself, or even having a co-seeking relationship, we are two lovebirds, and we spend 6 months together, and then we're off to the other enclaves together around the world seeking. Yeah. I have a sense that my nervous system would be shot now, or like some of these Galapagos puffins or whatever. It's just like, no, I'm done with these endless flights.
Yeah.
Didn't give me my partner I want.
I'm so glad you say this. And I actually expected you to say this, because I do feel like there's something really special in your message of bringing more adventure, soul, beauty, art into life. And I can really see, because of the kind of escapist culture that we have, how it at a certain point can become a flight from what the soul now wants. Maybe at a certain point I was propelled onto my quest, but if I don't sort of like to use the whole hero's journey metaphor of coming back to the tribe and giving the gifts, it's like if I am perpetually on the quest, there's a feeling of incompletion and of a willingness to take a stand and be responsible for the gift that I have discovered, and to steward that and to actually pay it forwards. And yeah, it's just inescapable. It feels to me like you need that adventure, but you also need to build something.
It's strange. I couldn't agree. In a way, I couldn't agree with the words that you're saying, because you're vocalizing something that doesn't come to my mind, right? But what I do notice in myself is, if you give me the choice between, would you like to sit down for a few days in a cabin and put pen to paper on some of your deepest thoughts and feelings and things that you've experienced? So Jordan, go and sit in a cabin for 4 days and try and write from your heart. Or Jordan, would you like to go on a boat for 4 days with 25-year-olds, with beer and champagne and staying up all night talking and looking at the stars? I would choose the cabin. And it's like, what happened to me? I don't know, but the the soul was like, I find more quiet happiness in, I can't perpetuate the same story again and again. I got to be happy with my lot and the things that I experienced along the way. But it drives me wild, actually, to be with people in a fundamental different stage of life that I'm in.
Yeah. But I also think that you wouldn't be happy in that cabin unless you had spent time on that boat in your past life.
Yeah, nothing to write.
Yeah.
I've got nothing to
No stories to share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No perspective of the world. Actually.
Yeah.
No real perspective of the world.
You've traveled more than I have. I don't know how many countries you've been to. I don't know. Do you have a number?
80-ish.
Yeah. You're like, that's not a lover question. It's like, no. But I think I probably visited anywhere between 40 and 50 countries. So I've traveled, and actually with COVID hitting and travel initially becoming difficult, I actually have really enjoyed not traveling and building a life with Michelle here. and how I ended up in the Swedish countryside is a question in and of itself. But I don't think I could be excited about building a family unless I had done those things. And I guess ideally it's something that you do early on in life.
Yeah.
So what is it with these older guys? Do they like play out like a delayed youth, or how do you work with that?
I do believe that there is a phase of development that is a wandering initiatory phase where the whole job of the psyche and what we ought to be doing is going out into the world and experiencing mysterious things. The whole spiritual quest, different states of consciousness, healing, meeting
Yeah.
wildly different people and so on. And I think that's what we ought to be doing. And in an ideal scenario, we would do that in our very late teens, early mid-20s, and then discover what is meaningful, what our values are, and therefore what do we want to come back and really yoke ourselves to for the rest of our days.
Yeah.
And there are, we do have in the English culture, British culture, we still have some remnants that point to that. Different kind of Prince's Trust, and that there's this Duke of Edinburgh that celebrates mountaineering and the great outdoors. When I was in school, they did great treks to Nepal and Kilimanjaro. So there is still like an ailing, maybe crumbling vestiges of, the goodness of being a young Boy Scout, learning about the wilderness and some of these great virtuous things.
I wonder though, I have a
Yeah.
question before you move on. Has that been assimilated into consumerist culture so that it's like another notch in your belt, another like is your bucket list, process, or
Yeah, right. So
or is there a soulful component there still?
I smile with a lot of dismay because at that age now, it's such a thing. We also have the gap year. So either between school and university or after university and going into the workplace, you ideally have a gap year. And so what happens is that there are tens of thousands of young people every year that want to have a gap year. They want to have the best gap year for their curriculum. So they go online and they buy gap year experiences. And I remember looking through some of these web pages. Yeah. And there was one, teach boys in South America how to play football. I mean, great. Why South American boys would have anything to learn about football for me, it's a mystery. It's like they know what they're doing out there, but like pay many thousands of pounds, dollars to an institution that ships you over so you can pretend that you're giving some help and service that's not really that necessary, then get some big checks and go back to your corporate thing with a good gap year on your resume. So that whole thing has been largely corporatized. The other thing that is very, like, if you want to go traveling and have a wild adventure, the thing that has happened is that that whole kind of tourist route has become extremely commercialized as well. People say, yeah, that goes back decades. Travelers have always followed other travelers to comfortable enclaves. But now you've got with the cell phone and hostels that provide, meal delivery and a great cinema in the hostel, and everyone communing. So people go traveling, but they skip from Irish pub to Irish pub rather than having I'm going to go to a town where nobody looks like me and I don't speak the language, and having that, rare moment of stranger hospitality. Come in, stay with us. Oh, but is it safe? No, you can trust me. I will share. I want to share my bread and exchange cultures with you. Or going to sit in a wild place. Like, you have to be really intrepid, or you have to have a crazy older cousin or friend who tells you some stories that if you want to really go off piece. And I think for the soul encounter, like why Argentina or Brazil was so formative to me was I had my, I didn't do an exchange program with the university. I went to the university there and asked if they would take me in. I learned the foreign language. I hung out with the friends that I made. When people ask me, my friends, do you want to volunteer in this thing? Sure, why not? But it was organic. This like I went a reflection into the culture and then became invited to opportunities within that. So that kind of stuff is very hard to find because yeah,
Yeah,
it's
the world has changed so much. I
important.
remember I remember getting lost in these labyrinth, these narrow alleyways in, I don't even know what Indian city it is. Like, and you're just walking, not quite knowing where you are, and there are strange smells coming out of every which window and door, and all of a sudden you end up in a mosque, and like here's some strange magical man that all of a sudden wants you to eat with his family, and it's like, oh, am I going to get mugged behind a building somewhere, or
Well, Western
and
skepticism either.
yeah, well,
It's
it's
not
like it's hard to know, and that you need to then face the world in from this position of not knowing, and that is really formative. You need to learn what you can trust and what you can't trust, and if you're saying no to everything, it like after the fact, it's just going to be like, I missed out, dude. You know it, right? And so you end up in these weird places and having weird experiences, and it's like, yeah, that was like the highlight. But if I if I went on some website like magical man in an Indian alley.com, and then you just like like pay $300 to eat with his family kind of a thing, it's just not quite the same thing. So yeah. But hey, Jordan, there's a lot of weird shit going on in the world now, and it feels like even though there's so much that is streamlined and boring and soulless, and everything is so uh, normal, you do the same things every day, but at the same time, I believe we're in liminal times, and basically the world that we have come to know is sort of dissolving in, actually, quite quickly, it feels to me at this point. Like that process has accelerated. um and you were speaking to some of this in a video that I watched on your YouTube channel yesterday. um what the heck is going on? Your perspective.
Can I just want to back up to the last question because I think there was a piece we didn't touch on. And I
Oh, there
remember
was, yeah.
what you asked, but I think you asked if there is an older man who've never had that wandering period, does he have to go back and do that? And is he ever going to feel quietude in his soul until he had that? I think, yeah. And if you are like if you didn't live that wandering phase in your 20s, you can live it in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. But it's very good to have a conversation about what that entails and what that looks like, so that you can really listen to the particular calls of your soul and go and find those authentic, not knowing, find yourself in the wild, discover who you are in strange situation moments. It's possible to craft for yourself
Yeah.
that kind of initiation after the fact without getting so lost in the things that 20-year-old people do. So yes,
Right.
you can catch up, and I think you ought to catch up, actually, because what if you don't? You're just going to stay on that first meaningless mountain for the whole of your life without ever really trying to discover what these yearnings and desires and draws that you have inside of you are,
Yeah.
right? But coming to the liminal time that we're in, you had asked me your question in a really beautiful way. Like this is what we're there's an unwinding or an unraveling, liminal, and institution. So I'm just thinking we're in free fall. Since the AI thing came out, I've got no idea what's going on, and I don't think I can even
Right.
touch this. So if we were unraveling during the last few years of COVID, I believe now this is kind of free fall. I don't know where I am or what I'm more to. In terms of what the institutional world is, actually, I don't know. I feel in myself correspondingly quite stable, because I know what I love and I know what I want to be with and surround myself with, and how I want to live with the people that I love. So even though I see the outside world as in kind of free fall. I don't feel in free fall myself. I do feel
Exactly.
a bit like, okay, if we make travel plans, how are we going to do this? It's a little bit more tricky than it used to be. But
Yeah.
the feeling of what's within actually is very robust.
Yeah.
That's a more place to start from.
Yeah, I feel similarly, and we're building a beautiful life here, and I sometimes just feel really privileged to be living in a home where there's peace and tons of love, and we're like happy people, and then I'm also, as also you are, very attuned to what's happening out there, and it's just like somebody opened Pandora's box. It's all playing out, and so I do feel like, yeah, it's great to have this kind of privilege that I actually feel happy in the time in a time like this. But you were speaking to something that I loved in the video that I watched. You sent me that, and it was this idea of building world building. And so obviously with having this robustness inside, that actually gives you the resources to do that. So what world are you building right now?
Mhm. And building a world based around these experiences and concerns that we've been discussing. And I think my solution to this liminal unraveling time that we've been in has been to turn inwards towards soul, right? So a lot of people are captured by their various place, what they feel outraged by and what they're not liking. Some people are trying to make sense, of everything that's going on. And I'm like, what is soul? What is my story? What is my myth? What do I love, actually? And what brings me alive and makes me feel passionate? What fills me with wells of energy? And what are some of the images that inspire me? The poetry, the art, the film. What makes me feel really happy that I'm alive? And what makes me, what gives me my ground of belonging? Like, what are places that I want to belong to?
Mm.
And maybe some of those questions sound nebulous, but I might find in an author from 100 years ago who's long passed away, works of fiction that create a world. And when I read this, I love being there. I feel like I'm tapping into lineage, an ancient spirit. Particularly, I love these very robust and testicular male masculine authors. Hemingway's the world, Henry Miller, and so on. It's great. Jack London. These real male adventuring spirits. And I feel when I read these works that I tap into a lineage and then brought alive myself. So I find a second lineage. Obviously, I got my family lineage and all the kind of ancestral gifts and wounds of that. But I also have this as a chosen lineage. I have film directors. Like, I can watch a movie and be so enraptured by what I see. Screenplay, dialogue, photography, sound, music, the way the whole thing comes together. I have particular directors that when I watch one of their films, I just want to belong in this world, right? It's because these films exist, I'm happy that I exist. Somehow my existence is reaffirmed to me. And that's priceless, right? Like, for anyone out there who's an aspiring artist, like whether it's visual art or cinema or writing, whatever it is that you're trying to do, creating a computer game or an online community or whatever it is, or something in flesh and bone, it's worth it that someone can come along one day and feel such a deep sense of belonging in this otherwise fragmenting world, and they feel that their life is worthwhile because they found something reflected in your work. So that like these gifts that I've bequeathed keep me going in a really, really big way. And my question is, how can I participate in this lineage? How can I take the works that I've loved and create something within my lifetime? Am I capable? That's the first question. But really, it's can I add something to the canon so that 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 years after me, people can find my dusty old books and be like, wow, this Jordan guy he's kind of nuts, but I feel something when he's writing this. He's, the future gap year student who's going from Irish pub to contrived experience that he's paid for online. What if he comes across something that I created and it puts a big question? I think in art in particular, I know that you used to run a website about movies. I guess you had thought a lot about the symbolism, right? And in art, what is it that one day I come across a movie or a book and I see a symbol and it just haunts me. 15, 20 years later, I start to make sense of this movie I watched or this book that I read earlier on in my life, and then the loop gets closed. I also want to send like little symbols and messages in a bottle into the future so that what I feel is so sacred and makes me happy to belong, other people can find that in the future and they turn around and they're like, yes, thank God, like this is cool. This brings me alive. I could have lived a more boring life, but because I encountered this thing that Jordan created, it gives me another way and it releases energy in my body. So you asked me the question, about creating a world. What kind of world am I creating?
Yeah.
I mean, I could answer it to you with the aesthetics and the influencing things that I want to portray. But the broad thing is, I want to portray something of this essence that other people are going to be nourished by in this lifetime and then further on. Because one, why not? Two, am I capable of actually doing anything else? Probably not. This is probably my lot now. Like, I might as well do it. But also, I do sense that it's needed. I think the things that I love, the things that you love, the things that the listener loves, if we don't somehow create our own version of that and put it in the canon, put it in the lineage, contribute, then maybe it will be forgotten in the future.
Yeah. Well, it does feel to me like there's a splitting of humanity now, where there's the people that are still really attached to nature and soul and spirit and all of those things, and an increasing secularization, and a fascination with technology, AI, transhumanism, and that there is a certain responsibility of finding ourselves in the first camp, because as far as I'm concerned, that's where humanity lives. And that second camp is where humanity dies. And maybe there will be a genuine splitting, and some of us will be tasked with keeping the human soul alive. So, and it sounds like, as the artist and writer that you are, it's like you creating worlds sounds more like a narrative thing, like a soul thing, than necessarily building something physically.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I write, so I will produce books. I will produce a literary universe. I will produce.
You're an author after all.
Exactly. I am a budding soon-to-be author, right? I will produce a language that can enhance people's worldviews, right? So that's a huge thing, even if people are just reading online. And that might turn, I don't know, retreats and gatherings and online programs I offer. So that is a universe. And I can either be conscious of the fact that I'm creating a universe. Like you were telling me before this program, when you set out to make Reclaim Your Inner Throne, it's like I can make an online course with 10 different steps, or I could actually world build and add color and texture and beauty and kind of mythical feeling into all the different steps in my program. right? So it's world building. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
every, and it, whether you run a coffee shop or a mechanics or a gas station, or food truck in a gas station or something like that, you might think you're selling something quite simple, coffee and hot dogs, right? But in that place, you can actually create a world where people want to belong.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
on radio, the quality of the goods that you share, the smile and the welcome, the aesthetics of what you create.
Yeah.
One good cafe sometimes is enough to make me happy that I stay in this town. And if the cafe wasn't there, it would be derelict, soulless place.
We're missing a great cafe in our little town here,
There's a
because
pub.
basically there isn't one. I mean, there's this castle that has an attached cafe, but it's not in the center. So I know what you're saying. These places where people have really made an effort to world build, they can really make a whole town come alive. But I want to. We're coming towards the end of our conversation. There's a little bit more territory that I want to cover,
Right.
and I want to bring attention back to these men. Both you and I work with men in somewhat different ways, but similar enough ways that we are, on each other's programs and things like that. What do you see as vital for men now and moving forwards, for men to thrive and to make lives of meaning in these liminal times of unraveling?
Men is a diverse category, first
It's a
of all.
big category. Yeah.
So, it's going to be nuanced. But I think from my very particular corner of the world, initiation, and particularly to understand what is soul. I know I mentioned that word a lot. I haven't defined it, but what is soul? Does it exist? Is there a deeper aspect to you that's very unique, that's full of feeling, energy, where moments in which you find life inherently meaningful? What is that? What makes you come alive? What adds wonder and curiosity to you? What makes you feel awestruck? I think, the word initiation often conjures like some difficult masculine feat, like one vision quest or being buried overnight or some kind of army, 3-month basic training in the army or something like that. But initiation actually into the very wondrous and curious things that make you feel deeply in love and wanting to belong to life. Like, how does that pertain to you? What is your version of that? What is your flavor of that? Where do you need to go so that you can find all of that? Maybe in a big round the world adventure. Maybe actually you can do it within your own country, within your act. Maybe you do that more in art and culture. Maybe you do that fully in the wilderness. I don't know exactly the particulars for everybody, but what do men need? I think men benefit really, really, really from having firm, clear answers to those questions, because that's what gives you the inner robustness. I think other things too, but particularly to know exactly what is your essence and your soul.
Yeah. Great. I feel like this is going to be a conversation that leaves us with a sort of lingering tone of contemplation at the end of it. But I have two questions that I ask everyone. The first question is, what do you love about being a man?
Easy. There's something easy. That's what comes to mind. And it's not a rational answer, because there's a lot of very hard things about being a man, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like responsibility, what's expected of us, the ways in which we don't feel free. But you're asking me that, and it's a Freudian answer, easy, that there is an ease to when I rediscover my freedom, and I rediscover like the simple being in my body. And there is a profound easiness and an uncomplicatedness to being a man. Yeah.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Once we find, I think, a particular liberation from things that we suffer with.
Yeah. Nice. Second question I have. If all of the men listening to this podcast, if you had them all in a room right now, and you got to give them one instruction that everyone present would have a 100% implementation of, what would you tell them?
Oh my God. Wish I knew this question beforehand. Okay, I'll go with the Freudian first thing that comes to my mind. So every man in the room said we're doing a conference, and there's 100,000 at Wembley Stadium or something. What would they do? I would invite them to go in and remember the first thing in childhood that they really, really loved, and flesh out that kind of original, deeply inspiring thing that they loved, and then turn around and tell it to a friend. So they revel in the sharing of that. And then the second part, I would ask them, and how has that echoed itself throughout their life?
Great. There's a lot there. We have arrived at that place in childhood with several men that I have spoken to on this podcast already. So, yeah.
Okay, it's a common.
Yeah, in the previous podcast, I'm launching the podcast with Jakob Kjærgaard. He's a men's sexuality coach. I'm launching that podcast today, and he was sharing about how early in his childhood, not super early, but when he was starting to have sexual impulses, he discovered his subtle body through masturbation, and all of a sudden he starts unknown to him at that point, but he starts the path towards teaching men on what is actually possible in the realm of sexuality. And so I think it's a place that is often overlooked because we aren't necessarily shown the value and wisdom of what comes up before we get fully conditioned by culture. So, Jordan, this has been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed traveling on these pathways of the soul with you today. I want you to let the men who are taken and wanting more of your message, I want you to tell them where they can find more.
Yeah, and if any women have snuck into this conversation, they can also find
Cool.
JordanLukeCollier.com as everything, and my writing is on Substack, so JordanLukeCollier.substack.com, and I'm also on YouTube as well.
Yeah, and you have a program called Legacy, I believe.
Yep. Yeah. It's actually launching soon. Within a month, I'm going to open it up again. And it's a year-long coaching.
You've run it now for how many?
1 year. We just finished the maiden journey. It was wild.
Nice.
The guys' beaming faces at the end it felt like a really good passage. Yeah, so we're going to launch again. Legacy
That's
course
fantastic.
again. Details are on my website. You can click through and have a look at all the information on the page.
Great. Well, I guess we're at the end of the road for this time. Jordan, thank you for coming. Thank you for being a host on the WAYSHOWERS podcast. And to those of you having listened in today, or you're watching this on YouTube. I hope you've enjoyed this episode with Jordan, and don't hesitate to contact him if there are certain soul strings that have been plucked. So I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode. I hope you have a great day, and bye for now.
Right. Thank you.